Grandpa's letter. One day, our grandfather left and never came back. We searched for him, but it was no use. Half a year later, while going through his closet, I picked up Grandpa's coat and felt something in the pocket. I reached in, unfolded a note, and saw his handwriting. It said, "My dear ones, this is not a farewell, not a will. It's a joke. I've been living in the forest with an old friend you've never met. Here's the address. Once you find this letter, come visit. I want to see your faces." A week later, we drove to the coordinates. The forest was deep, the road broken, no signal. The house was real, wooden, old. Inside, it smelled like firewood. We waited an hour, then 2. Night fell quickly. Something rustled outside. Dad went to check. He didn't come back. We were alone. George noticed. One of the cups was empty. Peppa turned around, but she wasn't looking at Mom anymore. She was staring at something behind her. The tape. Peppa found a box in the closet. Dusty. Old. On it was written, "Our home," in childish handwriting. Inside was a tape, a regular VHS. But their family hadn't owned a player in years. Mummy Pig was surprised. Someone must have mixed it up. Let's throw it away? But Daddy Pig said, "I have an old player in the basement. We can watch." That evening, they all gathered in the living room. The screen flickered. The image shook. On the tape, their house, like someone was standing silently, filming. "Strange," said Mummy Pig. "I don't remember anyone recording us." Then, dinner scene. Everyone sitting at the table. Daddy, Mummy, and Peppa on both sides. 2 Peppas, identical, both eating. But one of them smiled. Wrong. Suddenly, one of them turned her head and looked directly into the camera. And in the next instant, she was standing in their room. This is a lost episode no one could ever finish. Never-ending day. It all started like any other day. Peppa woke up in her bed. The sun was shining. Mummy Pig called her to breakfast. George was eating cereal. Daddy Pig was reading the newspaper. Everything felt calm. But the newspaper was blank, just empty white pages. Peppa blinked. She thought it was nothing. She went outside. Everything was the same phrases, the same smiles. The next day, everything repeated. Same breakfast, same weather. Mummy Pig started repeating the same words. "Breakfast is getting cold. Breakfast is getting cold. Breakfast is getting cold." Daddy sat frozen with a strange smile. George stared directly at the screen, unblinking. Peppa felt time breaking. She opened her eyes one day and saw strangers in her room. They had her face, all of them, and they just stared. She walked to the mirror. Her reflection didn't move. Its eyes were dark, unnatural. Once she saw George writing on the wall with black chalk. Peppa didn't escape, and then the writing vanished. One morning, Mummy Pig stood still, facing the wall. Peppa screamed her name, but Mummy didn't respond. Then slowly, she turned around, and her face wasn't hers. Another day, Peppa opened the front door, but there was no street, just a black wall. Dark shapes began appearing in the corners of the room. They didn't move, but Peppa knew they were watching her. And then, she didn't wake up in her bed. She woke up inside a cardboard box. There was a price tag on her chest, $13.99. Voices outside whispered, "Let's take this one. Give it to the kid." For the last time, Peppa opened her eyes and saw a screen. On the screen, just one line of text, "File successfully deleted." And then there was only black. No Peppa, no day, just silence. This is a lost episode that was never aired on TV. It all began on a normal day. Peppa lost one of her baby teeth. "Hooray!" she shouted, "Dad. Now the tooth fairy will bring me a gift." Mummy Pig smiled. "Put the tooth under your pillow, dear. There'll be a surprise in the morning. That night, Peppa woke up. The room was dark, but something felt wrong. She heard a crunching sound from under her pillow. When she lifted it, the tooth was gone, but there was no gift either. Only a strange white lump, like it was made of bones. The next day, George complained about a toothache. Then Mummy Pig, then Daddy Pig. They all said, maybe we ate something bad. That night, Peppa woke up again, but not from the crunch. This time, from breathing. Someone was sitting by her bed, a figure, gray, far too tall, with long arms and a grin that stretched ear to ear. "Do you brush your teeth well, Peppa?" it whispered. "You give them to me, one by one, every night." Peppa screamed, but no one came. George was asleep with his mouth open. His front teeth were missing. Mummy was standing in the hallway, smiling. On her cheek, a white patch like bone powder. Peppa ran to the mirror. On her face, new teeth were growing, but not hers. A third row. She ran back to the bedroom. Everyone's teeth were falling out, more and more every second, and someone stood in the corner. That same figure, but its face. Oh God. George started drawing strange pictures. In each one, a creature with a round head and white eyes, no arms, no legs, just a body. "It comes at night," George whispered. "I saw it." Peppa didn't believe him, but that night she woke up, and in the corner of her room, something was lying there, a huge round head. It didn't move, but it was breathing. When she turned on the light, it vanished. The next night, her flashlight went out. She heard something crawling under the bed, no footsteps, just a sticky sliding sound. Peppa looked down, and it was there. Face inches away, head round, eyes white. In the morning, George's eyes had turned completely gray. He didn't speak. He just stared at Peppa, and then it came again. From the wall, across the ceiling. It stopped right above her, and then the words,
"Now you've seen me too."
1313. This episode was never watched till the end. Peppa was sitting in the living room watching cartoons. A black frame flashed on the screen. Just for a second. There was a clock. It showed 1313. Peppa blinked. She walked to the kitchen. Mummy Pig stood by the stove. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," she said. Peppa walked up to George. He was drawing, but he didn't blink. George? No reaction. Peppa looked at the wall clock, 1313. But every clock in the house showed 1330. Everything was frozen. Peppa looked in the mirror, and there her reflection blinked before she did, and smiled. A strange, unnatural smile.
"Peppa!"
Daddy stepped closer, but his face wasn't his face. It looked drawn like a mask. He kept repeating one sentence.
"It's almost 1313, 1313.
The candy. When Peppa became a teenager, everything started to change. Friends drifted away. Her parents became annoying. And one day, while standing alone behind the school, a man in a blue cloak approached her and held out a box. "Try it. These aren't just candies. They feel like being loved." At first, Peppa didn't believe him, but the candies really did something. After the first, she laughed until she cried. After the second, she felt loved. And after the third, the world became soft and warm, like childhood. She started selling them to classmates. Everyone wanted them. Everyone paid, even the teachers. Her mother asked, "Where did you get this money?" Peppa just shrugged, and Daddy Pig said, "You know sweets are bad for you." A week later, George disappeared. He never came home. Peppa found one of the candies in his room, but it had turned pitch black. Later, she learned, each box can only be opened once. If you open it again, you must give something in return. Peppa opened it a second time, but there were no candies. Inside was George's head with crosses over his eyes. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. "Open up, police!" The face in the corner. This deleted episode was never aired on television. Something caught Peppa's attention. She stopped and looked toward the corner. In the corner of the room, near the ceiling, a blurry face appeared. It was barely visible, like a shadow, but its expression was cold, lifeless. It stared at Peppa, as if studying her every move. Peppa froze, unable to look away. The shadows on the walls began to shift and twist, as if they were alive. Her heart started beating faster. Something was wrong. Something was there that shouldn't have been. She stepped forward, trying to understand what was happening, but the face didn't vanish. It became clearer. Now it was right in the top corner of the room. Peppa felt the air grow colder. Darkness began pulling her toward that corner. At that moment, Daddy Pig entered the room. He looked at Peppa and George with surprise, but his voice sounded strange, low and distorted.
What are you two doing here?
Daddy Pig walked toward the corner where the face had just been, but now it was gone. Instead, the shadows became more sinister, and the air around them thickened. He touched the corner, and something horrifying began. His face started to change. His eyes darkened. His arms grew long and misshapen. His voice turned into a deep echo from the dark corner.
Now I can play again.
Peppa and George tried to back away, but the shadows had already filled the room, and the walls began to ripple. A strange, unnatural music filled the air, making everything around them feel alive. They tried to escape, but the door was locked. The room began fading into darkness, and the music grew louder, swallowing them whole. We can't get out," Peppa whispered, her voice consumed by the shadows. Darkness swallowed everything. The shadows on the walls grew unimaginably large, and the sound of the music became unbearable. Peppa and George stood in a void, surrounded by the shadow. In that dark nothingness, they realized they couldn't leave. Everything around them was part of the emptiness. The music never stopped. Are we here forever?